Hare Krishna, my friends. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Bhaktiville. It's Friday night here in Bhaktiville, and Friday night means Bhagavatam. So here we are. We've been reading the introduction to Srila Prabhupada's translation of Srimad Bhagavatam, which includes a biography of Lord Caitanya, and we'll continue with that. Tonight we'll start where we left off, page 51 of the PDF, or page 29 of the book. Before we get started, let me offer my obeisances. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale, Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Dinamane. I offer my respectful obeisances unto His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who is very dear to Lord Krishna, having taken shelter at his lotus feet. And to all the devotees, I offer my obeisances. Vancha kalpa tubhyascha kripa sindhu bhyevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. I also offer my respectful obeisances unto the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. They are just like desire trees and can fulfill the desires of everyone, and they are full of compassion for the fallen, conditioned souls. So up on the board here, we have the prayers that we sing before we start reading. So let's go ahead and start with those. At home, you can sing along with me. We'll sing the Sanskrit, and then we'll read the English. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. O my Lord, the all-pervading personality of Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. Dr. Mimulus, can you be the Slayer? I just did it, the slide changer. All right, the next slide. Excuse me. Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim sarasvatim vyasam tato jayam udirayet. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayana, unto Nara Narayana Rishi, the supermost human being, and unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Next slide. Shinvatam Svakata Krishna Punya Shravanna Kirtanaha Vidyantastu Sturyad Bhadrani Vidunoti Suhritsatam. Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, who is the Paramatma, Supersoul in everyone's heart, and the benefactor of the truthful devotee, cleanses desire for material enjoyment from the heart of the devotee, who has developed the urge to hear his messages, which are in themselves virtuous when properly heard and chanted. The last verse. Nashta prayeshva abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtiki. By regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam, and by rendering of service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service under the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Jai. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. All right, so page 29 of the book, page 51 of the PDF, and we'll just start right there at the very top of the page. So Lord Caitanya is in conversation with Bhattacharya, and they're just kind of arguing, and then they came to a conclusion And the conclusion, let me just read a couple of verses before. So Bhattacharya, in praise of the Lord, composed the following 2 verses. 1. Let me surrender unto the personality of Godhead, who has appeared now as Lord Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, who is the ocean of all mercy and has come down to teach us material detachment, learning, and devotional service to himself. And the second one, since pure devotional service of the Lord has been lost in the oblivion of time, the Lord has appeared to renovate the principles, and therefore I offer my obeisances unto his feet. So we're here at the top of page 29, and we'll go from there. The Lord explained the word mukti to be equivalent to the word Vishnu, or the personality of Godhead. To attain mukti, or liberation, from the bondage of material existence is to attain to the service of the Lord. The Lord then proceeded towards South India for some time and converted everyone he met on the way, become devotees of Lord Sri Krishna. Such devotees also converted many others to the cult of devotional service, or to the Bhagavad Dharma of the Lord. And thus he reached the bank of the Godavari, where he met Sri Ramananda Roy, the governor of Madras, on behalf of Maharaj Prataparudra, the king of Orissa. His talks with Ramananda Roy are very important for higher education of transcendental knowledge, and the conversation itself forms a small booklet. We shall, however, give herewith a summary of that conversation. Sri Ramananda Roy was a self-realized soul, although outwardly he belonged to a caste lower than the Brahmana in social stature. He was not in the renounced order of life, and besides that, he was a high government servant in the state. Still, Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu accepted him as a liberated soul on the strength of the high order of his realization of transcendental knowledge. Similarly, the Lord accepted Srila Haridas Thakur as a veteran devotee of the Lord, coming from a Mohammedan family. There are many other great devotees of the Lord who came from different communities, sects, and castes. The Lord's only criterion was the standard of devotional service of the particular person. He was not concerned with the outward dress of a man. He was concerned only with the inner soul and its activities. Therefore, the whole missionary activities of the Lord are to be understood to be on the spiritual plane, and as such, the cult of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, or the cult of Bhagavad Dharma, has nothing to do with mundane affairs, sociology, politics, economic development, or any such sphere of life. Srimad Bhagavatam is the purely transcendental urge of the soul. Hang on, I have to just adjust my windows here. Oh, Kandita's here. Hare Krishna. And Bhakti Mimulus is also here. Sorry, I forgot to introduce everyone. Good to see you. We're on page 51 of the PDF. When he met Sri Ramananda Roy on the bank of the Godavari, the Varnashram Dharma followed by the Hindus was mentioned by the Lord. Sri Ramananda Roy said that by following the principles of Varnashram Dharma, the system of 4 castes and 4 orders of human life, everyone could realize transcendence. In the opinion of the Lord, the system of Varnashram Dharma is superficial only, and it has very little to do with the highest realization of spiritual values. The highest perfection of life is to get detached from the material attachment and proportionately realize the transcendental loving service of the Lord. The personality of Godhead recognizes a living being who is progressing in that line. Devotional service is, therefore, the culmination of the culture of all knowledge. When Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, appeared for the deliverance of all fallen souls, he advised the deliverance of all living entities as follows. The Supreme Absolute Personality of Godhead, from whom all living entities have emanated, must be worshipped by all their respective engagements, because everything that we see is also the expansion of his energy. That is the way of real perfection, and it is approved by all bona fide acharyas, past and present. The system of varnashram is more or less based on moral and ethical principles. There is very little realization of the transcendence as such, and Lord Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu rejected it as superficial and asked Ramananda Roy to go further into the matter. Sri Ramananda Roy then suggested renunciation of fruitive actions unto the Lord. The Bhagavad Gita advises in this connection, whatever you do, whatever you can eat, and whatever you give, as well as whatever you perform in penance, offer to me alone. This dedication on the part of the worker suggests that the personality of Godhead is a step higher than the impersonal conception of the varnashram system, but still the relation of the living entity and the Lord is not distinct in that way. The Lord therefore rejected this proposition and asked Ramananda Roy to go further. So you can see here what they're going through are everything that we've been reading in Bhagavad Gita, all those steps all the way through. Sorry, just wanted to interject there. Bhakti Mimula says, yes, this is remarkable. Yes, it is. Back to the text. Roy then suggested renunciation of the varnashram dharma and acceptance of devotional service. The Lord did not approve of this suggestion also for the reason that all of a sudden one should not renounce his position, for that may not bring in the desired result. It was further suggested by Roy that attainment of spiritual realization, freed from the material conception of life, is the topmost achievement for a living being. The Lord rejected this suggestion also, because on the plea of such spiritual realization, much havoc has been wrought by unscrupulous persons. Therefore, all of a sudden, this is not possible. Then Roy suggested sincere association of self-realized souls and hearing submissively the transcendental message of the pastimes of the personality of Godhead. This suggestion was welcomed by the Lord. This suggestion was made following in the footsteps of Brahmaji, who said that the personality of Godhead is known as Ajita, or the one who cannot be conquered or approached by anyone. But such Ajita also becomes Jita, conquered, by one method, which is very simple and easy. The simple method is that one has to give up the arrogant attitude of declaring oneself to be God himself. One must be very meek and submissive, and try to live peacefully by lending the ear to the speeches of the transcendentally self-realized soul, who speaks on the message of Bhagavad Dharma, or the religion of glorifying the Supreme Lord and his devotees. To glorify a great man is a natural instinct for living beings, but they have not learned, they have not learned to glorify the Lord. Perfection of life is attained simply by glorifying the Lord in association with the self-realized devotee of the Lord. There's a footnote here. And Prabhupada says, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness is formed for this purpose. Jai. The self-realized devotee is he who surrenders unto the Lord fully and who does not have attachment for material propensity or prosperity. Material prosperity and sense enjoyment and their advancement are all activities of ignorance in human society. Peace and friendship are impossible for a society detached from the association of God and his devotees. It is imperative, therefore, that one should sincerely seek the association of pure devotees and hear them patiently and submissively from any position in life. The position of a person in the higher or lower status of life does not hamper one in the path of self-realization. The only thing one has to do is to hear from a self-realized soul with a routine program. The teacher may also deliver lectures from the Vedic literatures, following in the footsteps of the bygone acharyas who realized the absolute truth. Lord Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu recommended this simple method of self-realization, generally known as Bhagavad Dharma. Srimad Bhagavatam is the perfect guide for this purpose. And I just want to say that if an acharya is not physically available to you, then we have Srila Prabhupada's writings and the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is also Bhagavat, the person, Bhagavat, the person God. So, and Prabhupada has given purports, including purports from other acharyas in the book. So here we have Bhagavad Dharma here in reading Srimad Bhagavatam. Above these topics discussed by the Lord and Sri Ramananda Roy, there were still more elevated spiritual talks between the two great personalities, and we purposely withhold those topics for the present, because one has to come to the spiritual plane before further talks with Ramananda Roy can be heard. We have presented further talks of Srila Ramananda Roy with the Lord in another book, Teachings of Lord Caitanya. And we've read that book here in Bhaktiville, and the videos of that should be on our YouTube channel. At the conclusion of this meeting, Sri Ramananda Roy was advised by the Lord to retire from service and come to Puri so that they could be together and relish a transcendental relationship. Sometime later, Sri Ramananda Roy retired from the government service and took a pension from the king. He returned to his residence in Puri, where he was one of the most confidential devotees of the Lord. There was another gentleman at Puri of the name Shika Maiti, who was also a confidant like Ramananda Roy. The Lord used to hold confidential talks on spiritual values with 3 or 4 companions at Puri, and he passed 18 years in that way in spiritual trance. His talks were recorded by his private secretary, Sri Damodar Goswami, one of the 4 most intimate devotees. The Lord extensively traveled all over the southern part of India. The great saint Maharashtra, the great saint of Maharashtra, known as Saint Tukaram, also initiated by the Lord. Saint Tukaram, after initiation of the Lord, overflooded the whole of Maharashtra province with the Sankirtan movement, and the transcendental flow is still rolling on in the southwestern part of the great Indian peninsula. The Lord excavated from South India 2 very important old literatures, namely the Brahma Samhita and Krishna Karnamrita. And these 2 valuable books are authorized studies for the person in the devotional line. There's a footnote regarding Brahma Samhita. Brahma Samhita, he says, is the summary of Srimad Bhagavatam. The Lord then returned to Puri after his South Indian tour. On his return to Puri, all the anxious devotees of the Lord got back their life, and the Lord remained there with continued pastimes of his transcendental realizations. I just want to say, there's some discussion in chat. Bhaktiville says, Prabhupada is in his books. That is so true and remarkable. And then he asked, is that the nectar of devotion? No, neither one of those are the nectar of devotion. Nectar of devotion is Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Bhakti Mimila says, okay, thanks. You're welcome. Oh, Brahma Samhita. Oh, is Brahma Samhita the nectar of devotion? Is that what you're asking? Oh, okay, sorry. So, no, Brahma Samhita is the prayers from Lord Brahma. And Prabhupada is saying here that that's a summary. Brahma Samhita is a summary of Srimad Bhagavatam, which I did not know. So, let's see. I'll continue with this paragraph. On his return to Puri, all the anxious devotees of the Lord got back their life, and the Lord remained there with continued pastimes of his transcendental realizations. The most important incidents during that time was his granting audience to King Prataparudra. King Prataparudra was a great devotee of the Lord, and he considered himself to be one of the servants of the Lord, entrusted with sweeping the temple, and he's referring to Jagannath Puri, that temple. This submissive attitude of the king was very much appreciated by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The king requested both Bhattacharya and Roy to arrange his meeting with the Lord. When, however, the Lord was petitioned by his two stalwart devotees, he flatly refused to grant the request, even though it was put forward by personal associates like Ramananda Roy and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. The Lord maintained that it is dangerous for a sannyasi to be in intimate touch with worldly money-conscious men and with women. The Lord was an ideal sannyasi. No woman could approach the Lord even to offer respects. Women's seats were accommodated far away from the Lord. As an ideal teacher and acharya, he was very strict in the routine work of a sannyasi. Apart from being a divine incarnation, the Lord was an ideal character as a human being. His behavior with other persons was also above suspicion. In his dealing as acharya, he was harder than the thunderbolt and softer than the rose. One of his associates, Junior Haridas, committed a great mistake by lustfully glancing at a young woman, and the Lord, as Supersoul, could detect this just in the mind of Junior Haridas. He was at once banished from his association and was never accepted again, even though he was implored to excuse Haridas for the mistake. Junior Haridas afterwards committed suicide due to being disassociated from the company of the Lord, and the news of suicide was duly related to the Lord. Even at that time, the Lord was not forgetful of the offense, and he said that Haridas had rightly met with the proper punishment. Bhaktiville says he doesn't hear me. Can you hear me now? We're okay? Okay, so sorry. All right. On the principles of the renounced order of life and discipline, the Lord knew no compromise, and therefore, even though he knew that the king was a great devotee, he refused to see the king, only because the king was a dollar-and-cent man. By this example, the Lord wanted to emphasize the proper behavior for a transcendentalist. A transcendentalist has nothing to do with women and money. He must always refrain from such intimate relations. The king was, however, favored by the Lord by the expert arrangement of the devotees. This means that the beloved devotee of the Lord can favor a neophyte more liberally than the Lord. Pure devotees, therefore, never commit an offense at the feet of another pure devotee. An offense at the lotus feet of the Lord is sometimes excused by the merciful Lord, but an offense at the feet of a devotee is very dangerous for one who actually wants to make progress in devotional service. As long as the Lord remained at Puri, thousands of his devotees used to come to see him during the Rath Yatra cart festival of Lord Jagannath. And during the cart festival, the washing of the Gundicha temple, under the direct supervision of the Lord, was an important function. The Lord's congregational Sankirtan movement at Puri was a unique exhibition for the mass of people. That is the way to turn the mass mind towards spiritual realization. The Lord inaugurated the system of mass Sankirtan, and leaders of all countries can take advantage of this spiritual movement in order to keep the mass of people in a pure state of peace and friendship with one another. This is now the demand of the present human society all over the world. After some time, the Lord again started on his tour towards northern India, and he decided to visit Vrindavan and its neighboring places. He passed through the jungles of Jharkhand in Madhya Bharat, and all the wild animals also joined his Sankirtan movement. The wild tigers, elephants, bears, and deer, and deer, all together accompanied the Lord, and the Lord accompanied them in Sankirtan. By this he proved that by the propagation of the Sankirtan movement, congregational chanting and glorifying the name of the Lord, even the wild animals can live in peace and friendship, but to speak of men who are supposed to be civilized. No man in the world will refuse to join the Sankirtan movement. Nor is the Lord's Sankirtan movement restricted to any caste, creed, color, or species. Here is direct evidence of his great mission. He allowed even the wild animals to partake in his great movement. On his way back from Vrindavan, he first came to Prayag, where he met Rupa Goswami, along with his younger brother, Anupama. Then he came down to Benares. For 2 months, he instructed Sri Sanatana Goswami in the transcendental science. The instruction to Sanatana Goswami is in itself a long narration, and full of presentation of the instruction will not be possible here. The main ideas are given as follows. Sanatana Goswami, formerly known as Dabir Kas, was in the cabinet service of the Bengal government under the regime of Nawab Hussain Shah. He decided to join with the Lord and thus retired from service. On his way back from Vrindavan, when he reached Varanasi, the Lord became the guest of Sri Tapana Mishra and Chandrasekhara, assisted by a Maharashtra Brahmin. At that time, Varanasi was headed by a great sannyasi of the Mayavada school named Shripad Prakashananda Saraswati. When the Lord was at Varanasi, the people in general became more attracted to Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu on account of his mass Sankirtan movement. Wherever he visited, especially the Vishwanath temple, thousands of pilgrims would follow him. Some were attracted by his bodily features, and others were attracted by his melodious songs glorifying the Lord. The Mayavadi sannyasis designate themselves as Narayana. Varanasi is still overflooded with many Mayavadi sannyasis. Some people who saw the Lord in his Sankirtan party considered him to be actually Narayana, and this report reached the camp of the great sannyasi Prakashananda. In India, there is always a kind of spiritual rivalry between the Mayavad and Bhagavat schools. And thus, when the news of the Lord reached Prakashananda, he knew that the Lord was a Vaishnava sannyasi, and therefore he minimized the value of the Lord before those who brought him the news. He deprecated the activities of the Lord because of his preaching the Sankirtan movement, which was, in his opinion, nothing but religious sentiment. Prakashananda was a profound student of the Vedanta, and he advised his followers to give attention to the Vedanta and not to indulge in Sankirtan. Comment here in the chat. They were attracted to his beauty and voice. Is that what you said? Yes. Yes. Beauty and voice. One devotee Brahmana who had become a devotee of the Lord did not like the criticism of Prakashananda, and he went to the Lord to express his regrets. He told the Lord that when he uttered the Lord's name before the sannyasi Prakashananda, the latter strongly criticized him, although he heard him uttering several times the name Caitanya. The Brahmana was astonished to see that the sannyasi Prakashananda could not vibrate the sound Krishna even once, although he uttered the name Caitanya several times. The Lord smilingly explained to the devotee Brahmana why the Mayavadi cannot utter the holy name of Krishna. Quote, the Mayavadis are offenders at the lotus feet of Krishna, although they utter always Brahman, Atma, or Chaitanya, etc. And because they are offenders at the lotus feet of Krishna, they are actually unable to utter the holy name of Krishna. The name Krishna and the personality of Godhead Krishna are identical. There is no difference in the absolute realm between the name, form, or person of the absolute truth, because in the absolute realm, everything is transcendental bliss. There is no difference between the body and the soul for the personality of Godhead Krishna. Thus, he is different from the living entity, who is always different from his outward body. Because of Krishna's transcendental position, it is very difficult for a layman to actually know the personality of Godhead Krishna, his holy name and fame, etc. His name, fame, form, and pastimes are all one and the same transcendental identity, and they are not knowable by the exercise of material senses. The transcendental relationship of the pastimes of the Lord is the source of still more bliss than one can experience by realization of Brahman or by becoming one with the Supreme. Had it not been so, then those who are already situated in the transcendental bliss of Brahman could not have been attracted by the transcendental bliss of the pastimes of the Lord. End of quote. And so after this, a great meeting was arranged by the devotees of the Lord, in which all the sannyasis were invited, including the Lord and Prakashananda Saraswati. In this meeting, both the scholars, the Lord and Prakashananda, had a long discourse on the spiritual values of the Sankirtan movement, and a summary is given below. The great Mayavadi sannyasi Prakashananda inquired from the Lord as to the reason for his preferring the Sankirtan movement to the study of the Vedanta Sutra. He said that it is the duty of the sannyasi to read the Vedanta Sutra. What caused him to indulge in Sankirtan? After this inquiry, the Lord submissively replied, I have taken to the Sankirtan movement instead of the study of Vedanta because I am a great fool. The Lord thus represented himself as one of the numberless fools of this age who are absolutely incapable of studying the Vedanta philosophy. The fool's indulgence in the study of Vedanta has caused so much havoc in society. The Lord thus continued, and because I am a great fool, my spiritual master forbade me to play with Vedanta's philosophy. He said, it is better that I chant the holy name of the Lord, for that would deliver me from material bondage. In this age of Kali, there is no other religion but the glorification of the Lord by utterance of his holy name, and that is the injunction of all the revealed scriptures. and my spiritual master has taught me one shloka from the Brihan Naradiya Purana, which is Harinama, Harinama, Harinama eva kevalam, Halo nasteva, 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 Gatir anyata. So on the order of my spiritual master, I chant the holy name of Hari, and I am now mad after this holy name. Whenever I utter the holy name, I forget myself completely, and sometimes I laugh, cry, and dance like a madman. I thought that I had actually gone mad by this process of chanting, and therefore I asked my spiritual master about it. He informed me that this was the real effect of chanting the holy name, which produces a transcendental emotion that is a rare manifestation. It is the sign of love of God, which is the ultimate end of life. Love of God is transcendental to liberation, or mukti, and thus it is called the fifth stage of spiritual realization, above the stage of liberation. By chanting the holy name of Krishna, one attains the stage of love of God, and it was good that fortunately I was favored with this blessing. On hearing this statement from the Lord, the Mayavadi sannyasi asked the Lord, what was the harm in studying the Vedanta along with chanting the holy name? Prakashananda Saraswati knew well that the Lord was formerly known as Nimai Pandit, a very learned scholar of Navadvip, and his posing as a great fool was certainly to some purpose. Hearing this inquiry by the sannyasi, the Lord smiled and said, my dear sir, if you do not mind, I will answer your inquiry. All the sannyasis there were very much pleased with the Lord for his honest dealings, and they unanimously replied that they would not be offended by whatever he replied. The Lord then spoke as follows. Vedanta Sutra is comprised of transcendental words or sounds uttered by the transcendental personality of Godhead. As such, in the Vedanta, there cannot be any human deficiencies like mistake, illusion, cheating, or inefficiency. The message of the Upanishads is expressed in the Vedanta Sutra, and what is said there directly is certainly glorified. Whatever interpretations have been given by Shankaracharya have no direct bearing on the sutra, and therefore such commentation spoils everything. The word Brahman indicates the greatest of all, which is full with transcendental opulences, superior to all. Brahman is ultimately the personality of Godhead, and he is covered by indirect interpretations and established as impersonal. Everything that is in the spiritual world is full of transcendental bliss, including the form, body, place, and paraphernalia of the Lord. All are eternally cognizant and blissful. It is not the fault of the Acharya Shankara that he has so interpreted Vedanta, but if someone accepts it, then certainly he is doomed. Anyone who accepts the transcendental body of the personality of Godhead as something mundane certainly commits the greatest blasphemy. The Lord thus spoke to the sannyasi almost in the same way that he spoke to the Bhattacharya of Puri, and by forceful arguments he nullified the Mayavad interpretations of the Vedanta Sutra. All the sannyasis there claimed that the Lord was the personified Vedas and the personality of Godhead. All the sannyasis were converted to the cult of bhakti, and all of them accepted the holy name of the Lord Shri Krishna, and they dined together with the Lord in the midst of them. After this conversation of the sannyasis, the popularity of the Lord increased at Varanasi, and thousands of people assembled to see the Lord in person. The Lord thus established the primary importance of Srimad Bhagavad Dharma, and he defeated all other systems of spiritual realization. Since then, everyone at Varanasi was overwhelmed with the transcendental Sankirtan movement. And we'll stop there. Bhakti Mimulus reminds me, Al-Kandita reminds me, this is Nectar, but I think our time is up. Yes. We go a little bit past the half-hour point because we do so many introductory things at the beginning. So thank you very much for letting me read, and I think next week we'll finish the introduction and start reading Srimad Bhagavatam itself. Thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.